Despite Anthony Joshua's uninspired performance against Jermaine Franklin, I just sense there's something about his new partnership with Derrick James that feels like it's going to work out very well. They've only been together for a couple of months, but there's already a simpatico there. One thing I noticed is that both before the first bell and after the final bell of the Franklin fight, Derrick James was in AJ's ear, constantly talking to him, even after the fight was over. He's programming him. You didn't see this with Robert Garcia. You didn't even see this with Rob McCracken, at least not to this extent. A subscriber of mine recently told me that he thinks Robert Garcia was actually a better fit for AJ, owing to the fact that in his view, AJ looked better in the Usyk rematch than he did against Franklin. Here's why I disagree. Robert Garcia fighters typically aren't very defensive-minded. They're often willing to take shots in order to land their own. And while that may have been what was required for AJ to maximize his chances against a relatively light puncher in Usyk, you certainly wouldn't advise that strategy against Wilder, Joyce, White, or any of the big punchers in the division. Hence, in the long term, I'm not sure whether Garcia would have been the best choice. Derrick James fighters, on the other hand, tend to be assertive rather than aggressive. They tend to have a methodical approach and do everything behind a solid defense. This style offers more psychological comfort to a fighter like AJ, who doesn't have confidence in his own punch resistance. James seems to understand AJ as a person better than Robert Garcia did, hence them appearing to be much closer. It's very important for the personalities of fighter and trainer to gel. It doesn't matter how knowledgeable a trainer is. If the fighter doesn't feel comfortable with his personality and methods of communication, it's not going to work. From what I've heard, Derrick James stripped AJ's technique right back to the basics in camp because he apparently felt that AJ had a ton of bad habits. They only had 10 weeks to work together, and as such, James said the strategy he devised was very simple. He wanted AJ to stick to the basics and do them correctly. He didn't want to overcomplicate things. And ditto for his corner work. He didn't want to overload AJ with information, so he kept his instructions simple in order to minimize mistakes and negate falling back into his old bad habits. After the fight, James said he was happy because AJ did everything he asked him to do. He said if people weren't happy with AJ's performance, they should blame him, as in Derrick James, because AJ was just boxing to instructions. The inferred objective, other than getting the win, was for AJ to sync with James's way of doing things, not to look good necessarily. And an opponent like Jermaine Franklin is safe enough to do that with. Lennox Lewis's first fight under Manny Stewart was against Lionel Butler, and he did not look good. He had far more impressive performances under previous trainers John Davenport and Pepe Correa. Lewis didn't look entirely convincing under Stewart until his win over Andrew Golota 6 fights later. Similar situation with Vladimir Klitschko. His first fight with Manny Stewart was against Lamont Brewster, and he got knocked out. He then got dropped in 2 of his next 3 fights with Stewart in the corner as well. But they stayed together and eventually gelled. Another one would be Amir Khan. When he first hooked up with Virgil Hunter, he looked poor in their first 2 fights against Molina and Diaz. But everything clicked in their third fight, and that turned out to be one of his career best performances. It usually does take time, at least 2 or 3 fights, for a fighter and trainer to gel. There often is a teething stage where the fighter can look worse in the short term, but end up looking better in the long term, as per the examples given. But going back to the simpatico between Derrick James and Anthony Joshua, James has something in common with AJ that he doesn't have with some of his other fighters like Errol Spence, Charlo, or Frank Martin. And that is, they've both been knocked out before. Derrick James was knocked out several times during his pro career. He knows what that type of humiliation feels like. Perhaps he believes he didn't receive the kind of psychological support he needed to bounce back from those knockout defeats and therefore didn't fulfill his potential as a result. I just wonder if Derrick James sees training Anthony Joshua as an opportunity not only to redeem AJ, but also to vicariously redeem himself. Now look, this is obviously pure speculation. I'm not telling you that any of this is accurate. I'm just thinking out loud here and telling you what I'm sensing. Despite AJ's very gun-shy performance against Franklin, for some odd reason, something in my subconscious is telling me it's unwise to write him off. I made several videos in the past where I said perhaps AJ actually needs to be written off by the majority of people. that might be the best thing for him, because I think he's been struggling with the pressure and the weight of expectation. If you take that pressure away, you might find that he performs a lot better. And most crucially, if the other heavyweights write him off, as they seem to be doing, they might underestimate him. Maybe he'll be more dangerous as an underdog. It happened with Lennox Lewis back in the day. Both Ray Mercer and Evander Holyfield admitted that they underestimated him. They thought they were going to knock him out. They said they were surprised by how tough he was. Mercer said he didn't think Lewis would be able to go toe-to-toe with him like that. Let's, for argument's sake, say that the consensus top 4 right now is Usyk, Fury, Joyce, and Wilder. Something is telling me that AJ is actually going to take down at least one of those fighters. Again, it seems highly improbable at this moment when you weigh up their recent form, but for some reason, I'm sensing that AJ does have at least one performance like that in him, where he'll be written off by everyone, come in as an underdog, and pull off the upset. It's the kind of thing that tends to happen in heavyweight boxing above all other divisions. Anyway, time will tell if my senses are betraying me here, but I'm just telling you what messages I'm receiving from out of the ether. Are you sick and tired of the mainstream mindset? Does the dogmatic conformity and pathological ignorance have you tearing your hair out in frustration? Then don't be alone. Come and join our brotherhood on Patreon. We stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. You'll gain access to my weekly topical podcast, where we take more deep dives than Jacques Cousteau on an endless variety of subjects. There's also videos, interviews, live Q&As, as well as a vast back catalogue of previous episodes, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen via the Patreon app or download in high-quality MP3. Connect with myself and hundreds of other members in our Element chat group. There's no contract, no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a Mickey D's McMuffin. Just head to my Patreon page via the link below this video and select the tier called the Brotherhood of Reason. I'll see you over there. Oh yeah, we out here. We out here, bro. Don't get swept off your feet.